Hello, I'm Scott Johnson, General Counsel at Louisiana Realtors, and this is another video recap of the previous week's topics covered during Risk Management Month. Last week we discussed fair housing, continuing education requirements, smartphone use in your car, dual agency, and social media pitfalls. Let's talk about some of those topics now. On Monday we talked about fair housing and specifically what to do when a buyer asks for information that's related to a protected class under fair housing. As you know, fair housing laws prohibit any discrimination against people based upon their race, nationality, religion, gender, or family status, and other classes in housing decisions. What this means is that realtors cannot direct certain types of people, say a family of 5, to housing that realtor believes is appropriate for their class. On the other hand, if a client asks to see family-friendly housing, a realtor can help out their clients. The best way to handle this is by asking specific questions. When someone says they want to live in a family-friendly home, ask them how many bedrooms they're looking for and what other specific features that they are looking for in a family-friendly home. Once you have that information, it'll be easy to provide them with a house without being accused of steering them to a certain type of property. On the other hand, if you have a client who asks for information about the racial makeup of a neighborhood, let's say you have a Hispanic client who wants to live in a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. While that desire is not a problem, the realtor shouldn't be involved in identifying what neighborhood is a Hispanic neighborhood or a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood. Instead, help your client to go to other resources to find out which neighborhoods are most comfortable for them or what area is most comfortable or interesting to them, and then help them find the appropriate house within that area. On Tuesday, we talked about the continuing education requirement. As you know, all licensees must have at least 12 hours of continuing education, with at least 4 hours taken in the mandatory topic named annually by the Louisiana Real Estate Commission. Well, this past year, the Real Estate Commission did a fairly comprehensive audit of licensees to determine who had in fact completed their education requirements. In that process, many of our members were asked to produce evidence of their CE attendance, and some valuable lessons were learned. First, if you don't have your continuing education requirements, you can be fined by the Real Estate Commission, and you will be asked to complete those hours that you failed to get last year in addition to your annual requirements for the coming year. You should keep all paperwork showing your attendance at a continuing education course, because while it's the vendor's responsibility to turn in attendance records to the Louisiana Real Estate Commission, if they fail to do so, the burden ultimately falls on the licensee to produce that evidence. And again, based upon this year's audit by the Real Estate Commission, they will be asking licensees to produce those records, so make sure you keep yours. On Wednesday, we talked about smartphone use in the car. On August 15th, the new law went into effect. This year, texting or surfing the internet while driving is a primary offense. What that means is an officer who sees you texting and driving can pull you over without you having committed another offense. Last year, they could only give you a ticket for the texting if you had committed another violation, speeding for example. So now, if you're seen texting and driving, you can be ticketed immediately. The first offense fine can be up to $175, and second offense fine is $500. Also, you can face double those fines if there's an accident involved while you're ticketed. Other issues to consider, though, are just general safety. Obviously, distracted driving is one of the most common causes of accidents out there, so plan ahead how you want to use your cell phone in the car. Many people prefer not to take calls at all, while others choose to use a hands-free device for taking calls. Regardless, don't do any reading or typing, because those are both prohibited by law and obviously quite dangerous. On Thursday, we talked about dual agency. Louisiana law permits one agent to represent both sides in a transaction. So while it's legal to do that, there's obviously some risk management issues that you have to consider. The best thing to do is each time you begin a relationship with a client, If you're considering the possibility of dual agency at some point in the future, you need to explain that process to your client up front. That way your client won't feel obligated to make a decision in the heat of the moment while a potential transaction is out there. Then, later on in the relationship, if a dual agency opportunity comes up, go over that information again and specifically go over the dual agency form. Make sure that both clients have signed that dual agency form before you begin any of the negotiation process. Next, be aware that clients change their mind. You should have an exit strategy for your clients if they later decide that the dual agency relationship is not working for them. Let them know that they can go to another agent who can continue to represent them and allow them to pursue the home they're interested in without your agency relationship getting in the way. And finally, you yourself have to be mentally prepared to let a client go. While you may have done a lot of work to bring a deal to fruition, it's not worth the possible problems associated with a disgruntled client to push a dual agency relationship. Work out a deal with the new agent, make sure everyone's compensated fairly, but make sure your client gets taken care of first. Finally, on Friday, we talked about social media. So many agents now are using social media both for social purposes and for business purposes. If you're marketing either your services or properties on Facebook or any other social media, you need to make sure that you're taking steps to comply with the law. Remember that Louisiana Real Estate Commission advertising rules apply to all advertising regardless of what media you're using. So if you're using Facebook to market your properties, make sure you're complying with those regulations. For example, the requirement that each advertisement have the broker's name and telephone number. How does that apply to a Facebook post or a Twitter update? That's unclear, and thankfully the Real Estate Commission has decided that they won't fine or punish agents who they later determine violate the rules. They'll send a cease and desist letter to give an agent a chance to correct their behavior. But in the meantime, if you're marketing on Facebook, make sure that your clients and the people reading your advertisements have ready, clear access to your broker and firm information and their telephone number, and make sure you comply with the other advertising regulations. Some other helpful Facebook tips or social media tips include think before you tweet. It's easy to put your thoughts and comments out on the internet, but remember to think twice before you put something out there, because that can be read, and if you make a mistake or say something you later regret, it's kind of hard to pull it back when you've placed that information on the internet. Also remember, keep your comments positive about others. Being critical or speaking poorly about others, particularly fellow agents, can lead to either an ethics violation charge or possibly even a defamation lawsuit. One final tip is to make sure that you honor copyright laws. If someone else wrote something, you're not allowed to quote them or use that material for your own purposes without properly attributing it to them. Finally, I'd encourage you to go to Realtor.org and find their social media policy template. That's a great tool for brokers to develop an office-wide policy clearly setting forth how social media can be used within the office. Well, that's this week's video recap of Risk Management Month's weekly topics. Thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more helpful information during Risk Management Month.